Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
And I come bearing good news from the city of Atlanta. As of 7:30 this morning, the city has fully restored water services. This according to an announcement around 7:30 from the Atlanta Watershed Department and the mayor's office. Atlanta, our water services have been fully restored. However, the boil water advisory is still in effect out of abundance of caution and in accordance with Georgia EPD guidance for public advisory in the Midtown area. We are pleased to announce that water service has been fully restored across our city. Our dedicated teams have worked tirelessly to resolve the issue, and I applaud them for their service. This from Mayor Andre Dickens. We appreciate the patience and cooperation of our residents and businesses during this challenging time. Together, we have demonstrated the resilience that defines our city. Mayor Andre Dickens with that release. It occurred to me this morning as I was making my iced coffee, boil advisory or not, that's fine and well. I've been using a lot of bottled water for brushing my teeth and putting water in the Keurig, and I even learned that I believe it was 4 bottles of water to make 4 quarts. How many was it? No, it was 8. It was 8 bottles of water to make 4 quarts of boiling water for pasta the other day. So I cooked for the week. Anyway, yes, resilience. We are a resilient people. Also managed to save a lot of the Gatorade bottles that I had used that were in the recycling bin for storing waste. And, you know, the patio to store those. I mean, yeah, resilient. We are a resilient people here in Atlanta. And now we have been rewarded with the full restoration of water. Here's something that I found pretty interesting. Saw this on WANF TV, the local CBS affiliate here.
Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon begins our team coverage here tonight.
And Doug, you've been digging into the costs needed to replace aging Atlanta's water infrastructure. It is going to be a massive amount of money.
Yeah, and a whole lot of time at that too, guys, but boy, is it worth it, because you mentioned the pipe from the 1930s. We had a worker come up to us and tell us that the pipe that burst here at Midtown, or at least a section of it, was installed in 1883. And so...
Are you kidding me? 1883, not 1983. We have people that I show as a real estate agent. I show people who I show houses to people that were built in 1983 and foundational issues and cracked pipes and not cracked pipes, cracked pipes. Let me specify that clearly. You know, we don't live in roofs that were built and not maintained since 1983. I mean, I get it. They were exposed to the elements, but 1883, that's how old the pipe serving Midtown Atlanta was. I can't imagine that there's a way, or that there's record keeping in the watershed department's bookcases anywhere that tells them the approximate age of their pipes. But maybe, just maybe, that's a project someone should get on, chronicling the age of pipes throughout Metro Atlanta. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we start by dealing with the pipes from the 19th century. Just a thought.
Doubt these need some TLC for sure, but it would be a project that would cost billions of dollars and take as long as a decade to actually replace all of the city's water infrastructure. Yeah. And it is certainly something that the city council will take a good hard look at before they do anything at all.
I mean, literally, infrastructure is often out of sight. And sometimes when it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
But over the past few days, a lot of Atlantans have had water on their minds, mainly because a lot of us haven't had any at all.
This is something that we're talking about all the time.
City Council President Doug Shipman knows it's been a nightmare and says it's time for a permanent fix of the city's aging pipe infrastructure.
Obviously, you want to avoid every kind of situation that you can, like we've had over the last few days.
Running below the city streets are 3,000 miles of water pipes from the 1940s, 30s, and 20s. The pipe that burst in Midtown, leaving thousands without clean water, was from 1883, installed just 18 years after the Civil War ended. Shipman says any projects would get a lot of assessment, a lot of studying, and a lot of discussion before becoming a reality. As for the timeline and the price tag for a full water pipe replacement, his best guess?
I would expect that this would be in the billions and that it would be in a 5 to 10 year timeline
The city's water system has its own budget, separate completely from the general funds.
Right.
There's about $700 million set aside for water in the 2025 budget passed just this week by the council, and some of it is allocated for pipe replacement. On top of that,
The city currently enjoys a surplus that has been built up over time, the largest in the city's history. I would expect that we would tap into that surplus.
You know, I was just sitting here thinking we had $16 billion sitting on the sidelines from the state of Georgia. And I'm not saying that the city of Atlanta deserves all of it or even half of it, but maybe just, I don't know, some of it, since the city is the economic engine of the entire state. However, I went to social media again. I just want to see what the governor's doing. Not a word about the Atlanta water crisis since it began. Not a word at all, actually, about Atlanta's water woes or infrastructure needs. Not a word since everything went asunder last Friday from Governor Brian Kemp on his social media actions. And before any loyalists rebut, well, this is a city problem and not a state problem, not really. Longtime Atlanta journalist George Chidi explained how there's plenty of blame to go around inside, outside city limits, and multi-generationally as well. Is this just neglect, a little bit of both? What's the story?
So it's a combination of a bunch of things. So the short answer in the short term is that there was a corruption problem over the last few administrations that is really starting to show up today. Some of what happened over the weekend was coincidence, but it's coincidence in the sense that lots and lots and lots of unfunded, deferred maintenance all started to hit all at once. And the question is why that wasn't being maintained. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is complicated. Because it starts 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So let me back up. White flight started to decimate the tax base of Atlanta and a lot of big cities.
Sure.
Starting in the 70s. White people with money moved out. There was a limit to how much you could raise property taxes and water rates without driving away investment. And the answer to that, frankly, was to not do the necessary maintenance on the sewer and water systems. Mm-hmm. So here we are. We got an 80-year-old pipe, and I saw the pipe. I went down there, and it was clay with brick. It looked like somebody built a water pipe out of cobblestone as they were pulling it out.
Like Roman Empire, right?
Kind of. Felt like it. Looked a little bit like it.
Yeah. Well, hell, 1883 may have been closer to the fall of the Roman Empire than to today. I think I'm wrong on that, but just allow me to hyperbolize just a touch. 1883 is a long damn time ago. Nearly a century and a half. I'm doing the math. I believe that, yes, nearly a century and a half, 141 years, y'all, since 1883 when a pipe was put in the ground in Midtown Atlanta. Oh, but good news, Atlanta water residents. After this past weekend or 5 days or so of dealing with water issues, you're not going to be charged for the loss of the water.
Yeah, and one other thing that Shipman passed on to us, he said that, with all this water loss that has occurred over the past 5 days or so, that is not a cost that is likely to be passed on to us as taxpayers. He said more than likely it would be reimbursed out of that historic city surplus that he just mentioned.
I'm sorry, but you damn right. Don't come to us for more money. In fact, we better see a big, steep discount. I mean, if you think about it, for a lot of us that have been without water, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Okay, 5 days out of a 30-day billing calendar, right? That's 1/6. My math is still here. That is 1/6 of a month. We better see a 1/6 reduction in our water bill when it comes in the next billing cycle. Am I right? Okay, so much of the affected area in Midtown, downtown, East downtown, I guess, Old Fourth Ward, they are still giving us the boil advisory in effect. Also, Atlanta Public Schools said that their summer school program again canceled for today. That has been the case since Monday. Two Fulton County Board of Health facilities, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, 10 Park Place and 3700 Martin Luther King Jr. Drive will also be closed. Patients advised to visit other clinics at 186 Sunset Avenue and 1920 John Wesley Avenue. Now, as for the political ramifications of this, I mentioned yesterday an op-ed by Bill Torpey in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Patricia Murphy piling on now as well. She wrote in her piece that appeared today, a leader missing in action can do political damage for months or years after the fact. This is zeroing in on Mayor Andre Dickens hopping on a plane after two mains had already ruptured in Atlanta on Friday to head to a fundraiser in Memphis, Tennessee, being thrown in his honor for his reelection when he has no candidate who's announced to run against him yet. As Patricia Murphy continues, President George W. Bush had to work for years to repair the damage he did by failing to go to New Orleans at the height of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, choosing instead to fly over the city in Air Force One. Oh, man, that picture. Closer to home, Governor Nathan Deal, Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed were both hounded for their limited communications ahead of an ice storm in 2014. Remember that, right? Conversely, a mayor on the scene and communicating can make all the difference. Deal got his chance for a do-over with another winter storm shortly after that one in 2014. A communications plan he had laid out earlier was followed to the letter. Patricia Murphy continues, nobody expects a mayor to prevent all crises from happening, and his being here wouldn't have changed a lot of the outcome, I might add. But she continues, but they do expect a leader to tell them what's going on and to be with them when it's happening. If you ever need to be reminded how crucial water is for basic living, try going without it as many Atlantans have. Along with drinking and cooking, water is essential for flushing toilets, Patricia Murphy informs us, doing dishes, making baby formula, and even running air conditioning. You know, there was another thing I was going to point out. We don't even realize just how crucial water is to things that we don't even think about, like shopping for produce at the Kroger on Ponce, for example. They had to take all of the produce out of the, I think they call it the wet shelves, the wet section, you know, where they have the misting and all that. They had to take all of that out because they obviously couldn't mist the produce because there's no water going to that store. And even if there were, what are they going to do? Boil it before they put it in the system? Patricia Murphy continues in her op-ed, and yes, it'll be in the show notes at ronshowatl.com once we post this to podcast later in the afternoon. Dickens didn't show up until a news conference Saturday afternoon. By then, I didn't know this, by then, signs had been posted on telephone poles in Midtown asking, has anyone seen or heard from Mayor Andre Dickens? Ouch. She writes, the mayor apologized at the news conference for his earlier silence and promised more constant communication in the future for residents. But that promise lasted until Monday when Dickens left another news conference without taking questions, including from a Midtown resident still without water. When will the water be turned back on, he yelled. What are you going to do if one of the high-rises catches on fire? Patricia Murphy says, those are two great questions, but Dickens answered neither. A news conference without questions is really just an announcement. I believe the convicted felon, former president of the United States, announced he was holding a press conference earlier this week and then took no questions. And I remember Wolf Blitzer on CNN just going apoplectic about that. It's not a press conference. It's not a news conference. It was just a statement. Okay. Calm down, Wolf. Patricia Murphy at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution continues. A major city like Atlanta with aging infrastructure, explosive growth, and a mayor out of sight, she should have said, during a massive water outage is more than a communications crisis. It's a leadership crisis. She finishes this op-ed. Dickens showed early on he has the instincts and the ability to do better. He owes it to the city to be the mayor they elected, especially when they need him most. I find this fascinating that now Bill Torpey and Patricia Murphy have both penned op-eds in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution targeting Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens. The AJC and its parent company, Cox Communications, has been rather friendly to the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility movement and the politicians, Mayor Dickens in the lead of the pack there, who have been championing that project for the last year and a half in the face of mounting criticism and opposition from the Stop Cop City movement and residents who signed, the 100,000 or so residents who signed the petition to stop the construction of that. It's just interesting to see now how this one event, this one singular event, and the mayor's presumed misstep getting on a plane in the midst of it all has now soured the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's op-ed writers on the Mayor Andre Dickens' brand. We'll keep our eye on that. The Ron Show, the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. You can follow the show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL on the Twitter X platform. I posted to Threads yesterday. How about that? Also, Facebook, Instagram at Ron Show ATL. I want to go back to the conversation we had with journalist and columnist George Chidi from the Atlanta Objective, who spoke to the state involvement, or I would say actually a lack thereof, outside of the Georgia State Patrol, which I believe helped transport or helped usher in the transport of pipes from Alabama. Y'all were being bailed out by Alabama. Anyway, the state's role in this water crisis here in the city of Atlanta.
This goes to the fundamental, political problem in the South. Is that, conservative state governments are, at war to some degree with their liberal cities.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an example of it. In a sane world, the state would step in. They've got a surplus. It's the largest city in the state. It is the economic engine for the state. And it would make sense to shift some funding.
All the sense in the world.
Establish a tax. The problem is, state leaders don't want to look like they're on record sending, the stupidity of this, sending money to Atlanta in order to solve those problems created by Democrats.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
No, I know. I get it. Yeah.
And in part because, the city sends more money to the state than it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think there's a role. I think that, there's a state infrastructure role in, sort of for economic development purposes.
Mm-hmm. Incidentally, while we're sitting here looking at Governor Brian Kemp's social media, who has said nothing about this, 500,000 plus people in your state live in the city of Atlanta, and the mayor has said not word one about this problem since it arose Friday morning. We're giving all the attention in the world to where Mayor Andre Dickens was and wasn't, and we have not said in the media at all a word about, where the hell is the governor? Need I remind you, by the way, that the governor's mansion, Marty the Girls, all utilize city of Atlanta water. Now, I'm pretty sure the West Paces area didn't deal with many, if at all, outages or low pressure or anything like that. But still, he's right here, I assume. As to the political ramifications or the ambitions of Mayor Andre Dickens, George Chidi and I did speak about that as well Monday.
One, he must assume at this point that he's going to have a meaningful challenger in 2025. I still think he gets reelected, believe it or not.
Mm.
But he'll have a reasonable challenger in 2025, and he's worried about that. But I've always assumed that he has higher, broader political ambitions than just being mayor of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, he got on a plane because there's a schedule to do it. He normally is communicating a lot about stuff like this, and he was radio silent until the next morning when it became really evident that half the city was pissed at him.
See, when I was having that conversation with George Monday, we kind of glossed over because we had bigger things to discuss at that point in time with water still out throughout Metro. In fact, I was still peeing in Gatorade bottles and leaving them on the balcony. Anyway, we had bigger things to discuss. But yeah, does the mayor have ambitions larger than the mayor's office in the city of Atlanta? We know he has close ties, and he has used those in recent days with the Biden-Harris administration and Biden-Harris. He's on their reelection committee. We also know that there is a Senate seat coming up in 2020. I mean, I don't know. Running for mayor in 2025 and then turning around and running for a governor's seat or the Senate seat that's up in 2026. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But he also said, George Chidi also said that to him signals, the trip to Memphis to go to a high-dollar fundraiser signals to him that Mayor Andre Dickens knows there will be a candidate coming up to make a serious run for him in 2025. I guess we'll all wait with bated breath to see if and when that campaign announcement comes and from whom. I would say if anyone out there is waiting for blood in the water, well, you have it. And actually, we're just grateful we have water in the water. Okay, when we come back, I'm sure it'll come to no surprise to you that I am once again disgusted by the antics of Marjorie Taylor Greene and her cabal of screeching howler monkeys. When the Ron Show returns here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
I came up in a generation where we watched 60 Minutes as a family. Usually because, well, it's on CBS. Usually because throughout most of my childhood, you'll understand, the NFL football games that we would watch, being Atlanta Falcons fans, they were normally on CBS because CBS had the NFC conference games. Occasionally, the way the NFL works, I believe it's the home team. If they're the NFC, the NFC contract would go with. Back then, it would be like CBS had one, NBC had the AFC, and much to NBC's chagrin, because the AFC just wasn't as popular back then. Anyway, we used to watch Falcons games. For the most part, they would be on the local CBS affiliate because CBS had the NFC games for the most part. Most of the Falcons games were either at home when they got the CBS rights, or if they were on the road, they were playing teams from within their division. So at least, I'm just sitting here doing the math, at least 12 of the 16 games would be on CBS. Long story short, we watched 60 Minutes on Sunday nights because the football games led in, and it was usually the very next thing. And honestly, in the 80s, we didn't have a whole lot of options. We had like 4 channels. And then, TBS and other cable entities came around and jumped to 16. But we were still watching 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes has been a big part of my upbringing and the formulation of my knowledge on not just domestic but global events as well. And there are those on the right who go, well, see, that just goes to show that there's a liberal bias. Well, I would argue that facts and data, math and science do tend to have a liberal bias, so there's that. But 60 Minutes has been on a long time. So long that Dr. Anthony Fauci had been on it a number of times, and back, by the way, when his hair had color. There was a postmortem that CBS aired after Dr. Anthony Fauci stepped down from the head of the National Institute of Health, and it was just a little 60-second clip, but I was just marveling at how far along his service had gone to this country. Dr. Anthony Fauci, I'm speaking of. And through the many and varied health crises that he steered this country through without a whole lot of political backlash until now. Listen to this postmortem from Steve Kroft after Dr. Anthony Fauci had stepped down from NIH.
Last night marked not only the end of a year, but also the end of an era. Dr. Anthony Fauci, at 82, President Biden's chief medical advisor and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, stepped down after nearly 39 years. In 8 60-minute stories, Dr. Fauci spoke with our late colleague Ed Bradley about the development of AIDS drugs, with us about questionable cures for AIDS. Leslie Stahl asked about drug-resistant superbugs. Steve Kroft talked with him about H5N1 bird flu. In 2016, it was mosquito-borne Zika, and recently, COVID-19. Dr. Fauci spoke directly in language the average American could understand, and he wasn't afraid of a little controversy in the service of science and medicine.
39 years of service to this country, and the ability to be as learned as he is, to be as smart as he is, and to still go before the media, go before politicians, and speak in layman's terms in ways that we can understand, because that's what helps. It helps to speak in terms that we understand when we're dealing with complex situations that affect our health as individuals and as a nation. And yet, in the last 4 years, Dr. Fauci, after his 39 years of service, saving untold scores of lives in this country, now is political fodder. I want you to listen to a conversation when he was impaneled and gave a testimony before the House committee earlier this week Congresswoman Debbie Dingell asking him about the personal effect of the Fauci backlash since Donald Trump lost the 2020 election.
Dr. Fauci, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I'm not even going to admit how long. Mm-hmm. But during that time, I've seen your commitment not just to science, but to advancing the greater good. And I know that this isn't a topic you enjoy discussing, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to ask you about it. But I think the American people need to know what we are doing to those who are serving the common good and public health.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's important to make clear the harms that you and your loved ones have suffered because of these deeply irresponsible accusations. Because you know what? You're human, just like the rest of us. So, Dr. Fauci, can you please share with us the nature of the threats you have received since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, there have been everything from harassments by emails, texts, letters of myself, my wife, my 3 daughters. There have been credible death threats leading to the arrests of 2 individuals, and credible death threats mean someone who clearly was on their way to kill me.
Wow.
And it's required my having protective services essentially all the time. It is very troublesome to me. It is much more troublesome because they've involved my wife and my 3 daughters.
At these moments, how do you feel? Keep your mic on.
Terrible.
Do you continue to receive threats today?
Yes, I do. Every time someone gets up and says I'm responsible for the death of people throughout the world, the death threats go up.
Credible threats. People heading to him to kill him and or his family. That's what America gives. First of all, I'm not going to condemn all of America. That's what some of America gives a 39-year civil servant who has served this country through GOP, Democratic presidencies, without issue, ... until the Donald Trump presidency went awry for Donald Trump and his cabal of cultists. Chief among them, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes or no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no answer.
Yes, it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a you don't know what you represent.
Oh,
But this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this.
Okay, first of all, I'm an animal lover. And beagles are sweet, adorable animals. I have no idea what the she's referring to. And honestly, does it surprise me if we find out that medical experimentation has been done on animals? No, because the perfumes and colognes that we wear have been tested on animals. I mean, what she is tapping into would be, I don't know, considered wokeism, would it not? I mean, because on the right, if we are asked to, as human beings, sacrifice to the benefit of animals or the environment or ecology in general, well, that's woke, liberal, hippie, tree hugger stuff. I get it. I like dogs too. Love cats, love dogs, love other people's animals. I take care of other. I do. And I find this sort of stuff abhorrent as well. But we have to admit as a society that we do a lot of testing on animals for a lot of different reasons to our benefit and not theirs. But to come to Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who she calls Mr., because, just another level of disrespect from this screeching howler monkey. But to come to Dr. Anthony Fauci with this quibble, I mean, are we really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, Marge?
So the type of science that you are representing, Mr. Fauci, is abhorrent, and it needs to stop. Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up
say
as you went.
I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But this is science.
What does dogs have to do with anything that we're talking about today?
These are scientific experiments. This is what you signed off on. But you also told the American people they had to distance by 6 feet. They had to wear masks. But let's also talk a little bit further about the type of science that you represent. NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers, a fact that's been hidden. Let's talk about the fact about, is it right for scientists and doctors getting paid by the American people, government taxpayer paychecks, to get patents where they're paid millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty fees, especially when the NIH and these government agencies, most powerful agencies in our country, are recommending medical suggestions and advice and making up guidelines like 6 feet distancing and masking of children. Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci?
Can I just say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I refuse to call her representative because she doesn't represent me. Marjorie Taylor Greene is railing on free market capitalism. This is the world we live in, the stupidity. And by the way, there's somebody behind Dr. Fauci in the gallery who literally did the hand to the face gesture, like literally just put his hand in his face, just aplomb with embarrassment. I don't know for whom, for Marjorie Taylor Greene, for the country as a whole, for the Republican. I have no idea. Embarrassed, literally hiding his face like, oh my God, this moron. Yeah, she's howling on free market capitalism. She's howling on people getting paid for work that they did, whether before, during, or after their involvement in a governmental agency or at a governmental job. I mean, Dr. Fauci later says in testimony, he may have made $100 off of some antiviral drug that he himself was a part of creating. So is Marjorie Taylor Greene now saying that people shouldn't get paid for their work? Artist royalties, right? I mean, is she against that as well, that people shouldn't get paid for the work that they did? Marjorie Taylor Greene is railing against free market capitalism. Let him answer her question, though.
Not doctor. You're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes.
God.
No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
objection.
I reclaim my
Mr.
time.
Objection.
I reclaim my time. Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
Just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license.
My God.
As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady will
prison.
suspend.
Prison.
The gentlelady should recognize the doctor as a doctor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this what we have become? Is this what we have devolved into? No decorum.
You know what? We can do that hearing about the poor men that were injected with syphilis because I support you in that. That's horrific. And this government that does things like that to Americans doesn't have decorum to the American people.
Mr. Chairman,
The gentleman is out of
point of regular order, please.
The gentleman is out of order.
Decorum.
I recognize the point of order. Go ahead with your point of order.
You got it.
No, I mean, I was going to say what Representative Raskin said. That's completely unacceptable to be able to deny Dr. Fauci, who's here, a respected member of the medical community, his title. And that's actually a personal attack on his character.
And I have instructed her.
He's not respected.
And I've instructed her to address him as a doctor.
I'm not
Gentlelady shall
addressing him as
continue.
doctor. Let's talk.
Oh my God. Y'all, she's up for re-election. I mean, every 2 years she's up for re-election. She is in a safely ruby red district. She represents Northwest Georgia. And apparently to that corner of the state, that's what she represents of the Georgia Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who can't show a 39-year government civil servant, a man who is a licensed doctor, and she can't show the decorum for her office, first of all, for the House of Representatives, for the legislative branch of government at the federal level, let alone address Dr. Anthony Fauci in the manner that decorum calls for. But then again, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why should we expect decorum from Marjorie Taylor Greene at this point? It's not going to happen. So here we are again, heading into an election cycle where the voters of that district are going to rubber stamp her in because nobody from the GOP thought to run against her to save face. We've turned the corner in the home stretch here on the Wednesday Ron Show. Thank you for listening. Show notes, we'll have them for you at ronshowatl.com. I'm not gonna get off the Marjorie Taylor Greene rant box here because I keep thinking of like those movie scenes where you have two people clinging to a cliff. You only have one free hand. Who are you going to save? If you had Dr. Anthony Fauci and Donald Trump clinging to life at that cliff and you can only save one at the end of the movie, obviously we know who the bad guy is, right? As esteemed as you are to save all human life, even the deplorable, you're innately wanting to save both, but you can only save one. If it's Dr. Anthony Fauci or Donald John Trump, who the hell are you going to save? Whose continued existence on this planet, in this country, is going to be to the benefit of the greater good? I know if you asked Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you posed that to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know what her answer would be. I also have, and it's a stupid answer, of course, because she's not a bright person. But I also happen to think it's laughable that she openly testifies in a House Oversight Committee hearing that Dr. Anthony Fauci, and after his 39 years of service to this country, through countless virus, bird flu, pig whatever, Ebola, the AIDS epidemic, but the felonious former president of the United States still facing charges in other courts. 34 convictions, sure to be more if allowed to continue. If she and her cabal will allow Law and Order, from the Law and Order party they are, to continue to dole itself out, surely there will be more convictions. That guy doesn't deserve an ounce of prison time. In fact, he's being unfairly criticized. He's being targeted. Donald John Trump is the one being targeted, but Dr. Anthony Fauci deserves prison time. I'm going to give you a little taste more of her back and forth with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a point of order.
Mr. Griffin
they
is
accused us
Mr.
of
Griffin
worshiping President Trump. We don't worship President Trump.
Gentlelady will suspend.
So the committee went back and forth on whether or not she should have the words, or her words should be stricken for calling Dr. Anthony Fauci Mr. Fauci instead of Dr. and blah, blah. Anyway, they decided, no, they can't really do it because the witness isn't a member of the House of Representatives or a senator or a former president. So maybe we should stop calling former President Donald Trump President Trump. But they don't stop doing that. I have. He's not the president. He's now a felon. In fact, that's the title I should give him. Felon Donald Trump. Not president. Felon Donald Trump. Let's see how Marjorie Taylor Greene and her cabal likes that. Anyway, she goes back to questioning Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Thank you. This was a time in history where you got to throw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals baseball game.
Oh, for God's sake.
While Americans were forced to stay home and watch such events that they love from at home alone on their televisions. And what a hypocrisy this picture shows. Here you are without your mask, with empty seats everywhere. Remember the cardboard cutout fans? That was one of the most insulting things to Americans, having to watch the games from home, where you got to go and enjoy the game and sit right next to people, not following the 6 feet of distancing, not wearing your mask, and everyone else was forced to stay home and stop enjoying life. And your science here, your science is displayed perfectly in this picture, where children in school were put in plastic bubbles.
They were in school.
Because of your science, your repulsive, evil science. And let's go back to your very own email. You said earlier you don't use email. Oh, you do. Right here. This is your own email where you said the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus. I do not recommend that you wear a mask. This is your email. This is your own words. But yet children all over America were forced to wear masks. Healthy children forced to wear masks, muzzled in their schools. And then they were forced to learn from home because of your so-called science and your medical suggestions, while you and all your cronies get paid from Big Pharma. You know that what this committee should be doing? We should be recommending you to be prosecuted. We should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. You belong in prison, Dr. Fauci.
Mr. Chairman, I have another point of order.
I recognize Ms. Dingell.
Just want to make sure the record is clear. Dr. Fauci testified that he did not use his personal email for official business. He did not say he did not use email. And I think today, this particular has been full of lies and disregard and disrespect, and we need to stick to facts.
God forbid. If you asked Marjorie Taylor Greene to stick to facts, well, she'd be quiet. Hey, maybe we're onto something here. What did she call it? Despicable evil science. Folks being cautious in the face of a virus that even scientists and medical professionals early on knew very little about. We're literally learning on the fly. Marjorie Taylor, first of all, I want to see her school transcripts. Like in high school and college, what science classes did she take? Obviously, she slept through them because she has no idea that when you are exploring something that you know absolutely nothing about, you proceed with caution. When it comes to communicative disease, you proceed with extreme caution for the greater good, for society. And if it means that, we're not sure if medical masks are going to help us, but we know that they prevent transmission of other diseases, well, you'll go with that until you learn otherwise. I'd be wasting my breath to say that woman owes Dr. Fauci and her family an apology because she's incapable of humility, let alone empathy or acceptance of one's own actions to the detriment of others. She is, after all, a MAGA Republican and a Trump sycophant. And I can't expect her district to do anything about it this election cycle. Maybe next. I don't know. It's going to do it for the Ron Show. Show notes, RonShowATL.com. We replay this 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app. On demand all day at ProgressiveVoices.com and then wherever you podcast. Back tomorrow. Have a great one.